On Tuesday, rail workers walked out after negotiations broke down between the networks and the RMT trade union over pay, job security and working conditions. Despite what has been widely reported, it is not drivers that are on strike. These are rail operators, platform conductors, station workers, maintenance workers and so on. And sadly, for much of our mainstream media, it seems that they are unable to do the most basic of fact-checking. As we can see from this tweet from Sophie Corcoran of GB News, we should automate the trains, make them driverless, and see how the train drivers valued their £60,000 salaries for doing virtually nothing after that. Or this tweet from Dominique Samuels, let me get this straight. Half of RMT workers set to strike have received pay rises and bonuses in 2019 and 2020, plus the offer of 2% pay increase in 2022 by Network Rail. Train drivers have seen their pay increase 20 times the rate of average workers. How are these strikes reasonable? But it's not just the workers. Our media have been gunning for RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch all week with a constant barrage of strange questioning, as we can see from this clip here of Richard Madeley asking about Marxism. Let's take a look.
You've been accused severally in the last few weeks of being a Marxist. It happened again last night. A backbench Tory MP said you were a Marxist with no interest in anything other than trying to tear down the government. Now, are you or are you not a Marxist? Because if you are a Marxist, then you're into revolution and into bringing down capitalism. So are you or aren't you?
Richard, you do come up with the most remarkable twaddle sometimes, I've got to say.
I didn't say you were a Marxist. I'm saying that you're being accused of being a Marxist, and that's not twaddle. That's called reporting.
No, I'm not. I'm not a Marxist. I'm an elected official of the RMT. I'm a working-class bloke leading a trade union dispute about jobs, pay and conditions of service. So it's got nothing to do with Marxism. It's all about this dispute. It's an industrial dispute, yes. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. I emphasise I am not talking twaddle and accusing you of being a Marxist. I'm merely quoting people who are, including many of the newspapers.
Well, that's what it sounds like to me.
Well, I'm sorry if it did, but I don't think it was. But anyway, to be absolutely clear, you are not a Marxist. Fine.
Not to mention the also bizarre questioning from Piers Morgan about Mick Lynch's Facebook profile picture.
Let me show you what I believe is your Facebook page. I want you to confirm or deny if this is your Facebook page. It's a picture of the hood from Thunderbirds.
Can you see the likeness?
Well, I'm just wondering where the comparison goes, because he was obviously an evil, criminal, terrorist mastermind, described as the world's most dangerous man who wreaked utter carnage and havoc on the public.
Is that the level you're pitching this at, Piers? That is a joke amongst me and my friends, and you can see the likeness, if you like.
So you're not denying that you are comparing yourself to the hood?
I'm not comparing myself to anyone. I'm me.
You've literally made your profile picture the hood. And I'm simply saying, I was a massive...
If it was a bunch of flowers,
Thunderbirds fan, and the hood was the most dangerous, evil person in the world.
He's the most evil puppet made out of vinyl in the world. Is that the level your journalism's at these days?
I simply asked you if that was you and your Facebook page.
Well, do you think I look like the most evil person in the world, Piers?
Well, now you're asking me to answer a difficult question, Mick. I don't know you that well. All I'm saying is you have personally...
I think I am the most evil person in the world. I think I'm a working-class bloke who's leading a trade union in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions.
I understand.
Now, Curtis, what are your thoughts on the behaviour of our media this week? Where are they going wrong?
Well, really, there hasn't been a proper union correspondence in the mainstream media, especially from the BBC, for decades. It used to be standard practice that unions had a big representation in the political discourse. That a new management took over and the right-wing free market revolution took hold. The BBC went the same way. The BBC became way more reliant on the business community, and unions essentially all being silenced. Now, the mainstream media can't seem to handle industrial disputes. The journalists we have today, they're not equipped for the discourse surrounding it. So when you've got someone like Mick Lynch, who isn't just putting his point of view across, isn't just defending the strikes, he's actually calling out on their bullshit. He's making them look like fools, and these journalists aren't used to that, and I think a lot of people are responding to that. There are most people in this country who despise the media. I think we do. That's why we're doing independent media. There are many people who have a very low trustworthy of the media. Britain has the least amount of trust in Europe when it comes to our mainstream media. So when someone comes along, it doesn't matter if you're the left or the right, when someone comes along and essentially calls bullshit on these corporate journalists, these mainstream legacy media journalists, then people do respond to that.
And I think that's why he is coming across so well in the interviews that we've seen this week, and why actually he is quite popular, I think, amongst people, because he seems to have some good policies and good, moral compass and a good politics, essentially. But also, like you say, he's not afraid to call bullshit on stupid questions, stupid questioning, just general bad journalism from these presenters and journalists.
And I've seen on Twitter, some people have been saying that, he's got a really good... He's a masterclass in what he's doing in terms of dismantling these journalists. And I argue that he's not so much... he doesn't have a good strategy, or he's providing a masterclass. He's just simply speaking from the heart, and he's speaking from principle. So once you do that, and obviously he doesn't care about a long-term career in TV, he's not approaching this thinking, right, I better tone it down because they might not have me on. Well, they can't. This is a big union dispute. The media want to interview him. He's got, for the next, couple of weeks, he will be on the airwaves, so he doesn't need to almost censor himself or tone himself down. Now, there's many people, many politicians or many commentators who want to, should I say, toe the line a little bit, because they're thinking, do you know what, if I make a fool of myself or if I go too aggressive, they're not going to have me on anymore. That's not the problem for Mick Lynch. So he can really speak from the heart and really be honest. And people responding to that, even people who might not necessarily agree with the strikes or a bit ambiguous on it, they're responding to him. And I think it's fantastic. I think he's showing up the mainstream media for what they are. I think he's showing up the journalists. You've got people like Richard Madeley, Kay Burley, people like Julie Hartley-Brewer, who aren't in their position because they're particularly good at their jobs. They're not in this position because they're particularly intelligent. They're in that position because of what they think. They're expendable to the establishment or to corporate interests. That's why they're sat there. If they thought differently, someone else would be sat there. So these so-called journalists who are essentially a mouthpiece for power, for the establishment, they are just a literal mouthpiece, and there's no shred of integrity. There's nothing investigative about these journalists. They're simply defending power and capital.
Another thing that's become quite apparent this week, and it's not necessarily anything new, but it's how much the media love to pit the working class against one another. We're seeing a lot of arguments of, but now doctors and nurses can't get to work, and so-and-so can't get to a doctor's appointment, and this kid can't get to school, etc., etc. But these people on strike are also working class people. Why does the media love to create this culture war, this sense of outrage, and steer us away from, I suppose in some ways I'm answering the question, but why do they like to steer us away from where our outrage should be directed at, and that's the CEOs? Why do they do this?
Well, that's exactly that, isn't it? Elites, those in power, have done this divide and rule tactic for decades, for hundreds and hundreds of years. It used to be about race. They still do it, but it used to be largely about race. And then now they're doing it in terms of strikes, because the worry for people in power, the worry for CEOs, the worry for politicians that support capital and big business is the labour force coming together, the working class coming together, because unity is strength. This is just as simple as that. So in order to break down solidarity, in order to pit workers against each other, then there's talking points that these journalists will come up with, and one of them is, well, why is this person striking because they're on such a good wage? And by the way, yes, train drivers are not striking, and they're on a very good wage. They're on a good wage because they're in a union. They'll point to people who are on a lower wage. They'll say, like, well, nurses are getting paid like 33 grand a year. They're saying there's other people who can't get to work because of what you're doing, and it is just a divide and rule tactic. And what we need to do is change the narrative and essentially say, well, nurses are on poor pay because they don't have representation of their views or representation of their material conditions. Now, it's funny as well, because those that work for the NHS, the government is their biggest employer. So when you've got Tories, you've got health secretaries going on TV and saying, well, look, poor old nurses, they're getting such a poor wage in regards to train drivers. Well, you should pay them better. You're the employee or the employer here. Pay them better. So it's a way to distract the failings of the government. It's a way to distract those from less material conditions or poorer material conditions compared to their bosses. And yeah, it's just a divide and rule tactic. It's been done for centuries, and it's going to continue to happen, really.